for a second. Caden Grandpa's there. He squeezes the line drive. And on a night filled with emotion, honoring our leader, Greg Sharp, with his eyes on the diamond and his hands on our shoulders, Nebraska takes down 16th ranked Vanderbilt 6-4. Sharpie, that one is for you.
Now, here's Tom Stevens and Mike Melby on 1499.3 KLIN.
I'm absolutely sick on just how that whole thing played out. Give Minnesota credit. You know, Ben's done a great job with that team. That's their 5th road win. And those guys are fighting, they're scrapping. And, you know, you can see that out of them right from the beginning. And, you know, our mentality has to be, you know, the things that I talked about in the locker room, the keys, you know, we got to go and execute those. And, you know, right now, we're just not doing a good enough job at it. We're standing. I mean, the ball was hitting the leg, and we just stood there. And, you know, the offense, well, what we worked on the last couple of days after Michigan didn't carry over until we got some urgency in our game. And then we got the pace we needed, and we got some things happening in transition. Got the ball to the right guys. We screened better. You know, Andrew had a couple plays. I thought he was terrific in that run.
Yeah, well, Nebraska loses a heartbreaker, 67-65. Minnesota nails the three-pointer with 4 seconds left. Nebraska can't answer as Andrew Morgan banks one off the backboard. Looked like it was maybe going to go in, but it didn't. And Nebraska loses a heartbreaker to Minnesota at home. And now they were already on the bubble of the NCAA tournament. And a lot of bracketologists say they're still in, but I don't know. They're still going to have to win, in my mind, at least 2 more games.
At least. This was tough. This was a difficult game to lose.
It's a quad 3 loss.
Yeah, and now we have 2
loss.
based on
some other stuff that has happened with I think Rutgers
has now fallen. Our lost Rutgers has now fallen to a quad 3 loss as well. So, at the end of the day, what bothers me more than anything is that they were 25 minutes into the game, the biggest game of the year. They talked about it. They knew what was at stake. Yeah. This is a game we have to come out with our hair on fire. And 25 minutes into the game, it was like none of them cared.
I wouldn't say
none of them
cared.
But like played pretty well. They did. Guys they haven't played all year. I mean,
Rigsby hadn't scored more than 5 points. I mean, he averages 5 points a game.
Yeah.
He gets 20.
Yeah, and the last 3 that sealed the deal, that put the nail in the coffin, that won the game for him, you leave him wide open. He's already hit 4 threes. What the hell is your problem?
Well, Fred explained
that last play.
Here's going through everything. He tried to leave, and then somebody asked him about the last sequence of events in that game. And they weren't.
Nope.
And they fall to Minnesota. Not a good team is Minnesota. They're 15-14, 7-11. Same as Nebraska. Yeah. They might be fighting to stay out of the basement right now for the Big Ten tournament. There's a lot of teams. I want to say there's 4 teams tied for 11th. Nebraska is one of those teams at 7-11. But you don't want to keep losing and play that first day in the Big Ten tournament. Winning.
Well, that's the problem. They won't make the Big Ten tournament.
That's right.
If they
that's true. I keep forgetting that this is the first year where you got to stay out of the bottom 3. I still think they will. I want to say it's Minnesota, Nebraska. I've got it right here. There's 2 other teams that are 7-11. I think Rutgers is one of those teams. I know Rutgers is one of those teams, but there's several teams that are right there. And Indiana, by the way, is creeping closer to the bubble. All of a sudden, they're 18-11, 9-9 in the league.
Yeah, so Rutgers, Nebraska, Northwestern, and Minnesota are all 7-11. Ohio State, who we play next on Tuesday in Columbus, is 8-10. And then, I mean, USC, as bad as that's the whole thing, though. This is the problem. USC, not good. Nebraska lost to them. Iowa, not good. Nebraska lost to them. Penn State, not good. Nebraska lost to them.
But Nebraska's not good enough to not show up and play well against anyone. It really doesn't matter the opponent. The Big Ten, everybody has players in the Big Ten. Minnesota certainly has good players. Their best player didn't even play well in that particular game.
I respect Dawson Garcia's ability. I respect the talent the man has. I think he's going to make some cash playing professionally. I don't know that his game translates to the NBA, even though he was a
6'10", so he'll get a shot.
He'll get a shot.
And
I don't think he survives long in the NBA. I think he'll play overseas. He's had that same hairdo for 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 19 years, however long he's been in the conference.
That's kind of a 90s dye job.
It's not a good look.
No.
And it always bugs me. I'm like, dude, like, don't do that.
Get a new barber.
Yes.
Get a new barber. Nebraska's third straight loss and puts Nebraska on the wrong side of the NCAA tournament bubble, you would think, although they are still mentioned in a lot of brackets as being one of the last four in, or they're right around 50 as far as the net rankings are concerned.
Do you know why? I truly believe this, because when I saw today that they're in the last four in, why would you not want a team like Nebraska in the tournament?
Well, they have a lot of good quality wins.
They're going to be down 32 points with 9 minutes to play, and it's going to be a game.
Well,
they're going to be up by 32 with 9 minutes to play, and it's going to be a game at the end.
Again, third straight loss.
They're on the bubble. Bryce Williams, 21.
And Jawan Gary, 21. If you had told me that at the start of the game, I said Nebraska wins. That's usually my formula for a Nebraska win. Jawan and Bryce need to find a way together to get 40. And that's usually the way it works when they win. They didn't get a lot of help outside of that. Connor Sejan had a pretty decent game. He had 11 points. He was the only other player, the only other Husker in double figures.
Andrew Morgan was solid again.
Yeah, Andrew Morgan was solid. Burke
was awful.
But since the injury,
he's awful.
He was
awful.
He was starting to play well. Then the injury happened.
He's awful. I don't know what happened. He's awful. Burke, fix it. You're awful right now.
Yeah, well, they've got a chance on Tuesday. They're at Ohio State, another team that's probably on the left side of the bubble. They're not. They're in trouble. They desperately need a win, and that's a talented Ohio State team. They've played some really good basketball this year and some really awful basketball, a little bit like Nebraska.
And real quick, to circle back to Burke, like he really was finding his groove, finding his niche, finding
that
what
injury was devastating
do.
for him.
I don't think, like, dude, it's a sprained ankle. Get over it.
It was a bad sprain.
This is a mental thing with him right now. 2 games ago, I don't even know what the hell he was doing. Like, every shot he took was ill-advised. This hero, I'm going to make a play that's going to be on a SportsCenter top 10 type of play. Just play your game. I don't know what happened. Was it the Illinois
game that he was hurt in? I'm trying to think. Right down the stretch. Like the final minute of the game. He had hit three. He played as a Husker. 15 points in that game. And then he goes out, and 3 games later, he tries to come back. I wish he would have just tried to come back and be, a rebounder, a facilitator, because he's pretty good at doing those things.
He looks like a different player, like he's trying to do stuff that
he's not capable of doing. He's capable. He was starting to become capable of, but then he lost his confidence with the injury.
I don't know what it is, but Burke can be a player. Go back to being a player. Like, there were so many things that he did so well. And it was funny because as the season progressed, you saw he does that pretty well. Hey, you know what? He's getting really good at that. Oh, you know what? He's really good at that. And now he's like, oh, you know what? We can count on him. Injury. And now I don't know what it is. None of us do. We're not in practice. We don't know what's going on. But at the same time, we know he has the ability. He has the mental mindset. He has everything he needs. He's just got to find it again.
Well, we know confidence is fickle. I mean, this is a team that was once 12-2, and then all of a sudden they were 12-8, and then they were 16-8, and you thought they were fine again, and now
they're 5-10 since they were 12-2. So.
Yeah, Nebraska, they shot it okay in this game. They, not as well as Minnesota did, but they shot it okay.
Yeah, but Minnesota,
but they only made 25% from three. Minnesota shot 47% from three. Minnesota hit 50% of their field goals. Nebraska 43%. So not great, but compared to say the Michigan game, I guess it was okay when they shot 25% in the Michigan loss earlier this week. That one still bothers me as well. But if I were to point to a stat that cost Nebraska the game, it was free throw shooting.
Again,
11 of 20 from the free throw line, 55%. And obviously Braxton Mia shot the first 6 of those free throws, and I think he made 1 out of 6 or 1 out of 7, something like that. So that doesn't help your average. But Nebraska, some of these games, and they've got to play really well to win any game in the Big Ten. If you go back to a lot of their losses during the 6-game losing streak or this past 3-game losing streak, you make some of those free throws, they win those games. And this would have been one of them. I thought they were going to win anyway. The tip in by Jawan Gary late as Bryce drives, fantastic to come all the way back from 19 down. Kind of reminded me for a while of the Northwestern game. They go up 1, but then they don't play defense, and Minnesota nails a 3 and wins the game. Nebraska ends up with a desperation shot, almost went in, which would have won the game had Andrew Morgan made it. But Brennan Rigsby was the star of the game, and Nebraska now 17-12 on the season. Ohio State coming up Tuesday, then Sunday they have Iowa.
So Rigsby, I was critical of Keisei Tominaga last year at times when he'd get on a heater, and this year as well. Just thinking back to last year, because of the antics, like, get over it. I get it, you're playing with a passion, but at some point, be a professional.
He reminded you of Rigsby, or Rigsby reminded you of
Keisei. Was worse yesterday because he doesn't have the clout. The dude shoots. It's like he'd only made 4 or 5 3-pointers prior to yesterday.
I get it. It's 5 points a game.
You had a game. I get it.
Keisei, you were saying Keisei was a guy that averaged 15 or 16.
Yeah, Keisei's a guy that does that all game, every game, and that's I could see the argument with Keisei.
Yeah.
With Rigsby, dude, you look like a person who has not been there. You look like somebody who had, like, literally the sun shined on you that day for the first time in your life on a basketball court, and you had no idea how to handle it. Totally immature, totally unprofessional. I mean, congrats, you made them. Your team won, but at the same time, you got a lot of work to do on being a good human being.
I was a little surprised to read
from Stephen M. Simple,
and we don't have him on the show today. We'll get him back some other day. But
you know who we do have, though?
We have BC.
We have Amy Just.
Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7. Amy Just, talked to her the other day. So she'll be on the show today. She's fantastic. Her columns are great. She has an interesting story. Maybe she could tell it on the air about Rink Mask, and his smarts are just out of this world. They will get back Rink next year to go along with Connor and then Burke. So you got a nucleus of 3 there that is a pretty good starting piece before you hit the transfer portal. I don't know what
bubbly
kind of
portal.
It's a bubbly portal. But I was just thinking about this for Nebraska basketball. If Fred had, I don't think he's on the hot seat, but Stephen M. Sipple seemed to go there a little bit. He was the coach of the year in this league last year. If Nebraska ends up in the NIT, I mean, what did you expect at the start of the year? At the very start of the year, yeah, you had Bryce and you had Jawan, but I certainly didn't know that this team would come together and be 12-2 at one time and be on the NCAA tournament bubble right now. They are. But I do think there have been mistakes in the portal, either by getting certain guys, and I'm not going to call out guys, but getting certain guys that don't seem to be a fit, or letting certain guys go that were already a fit. CJ Wilcher doesn't even play that much. Texas A&M's a top 15 team. They're really good. He plays, I don't know.
Yeah, him going there.
That doesn't make any sense.
No sense. If he wants to play, why is he going there?
Right.
He just wants to collect.
And maybe he did. I'm sure A&M certainly has the cash, and Trev Alberts could tell you that. That's one of the reasons he left to Texas A&M, and maybe that's the other reason that
the reason
CJ
he left to Texas A&M is because of his ego, and he wants to be the college football czar. I think is more along the lines.
But CJ would really, really help this. He'd be probably the best shooter on this team right now. Connor, it'd be a fight between him and Connor.
Here's the funny thing. You know who's shooting better than both of them? Sam Hoiberg.
Well, he doesn't shoot that much.
I don't care. Who's shooting better than both of those guys, and who probably should shoot more based on the fact that
he doesn't take that many.
He didn't even take an attempt yesterday.
He needed to. But what would you give for a CJ Wilcher and or Jamarcus Lawrence?
To replace some of the guys we got in the portal, everything.
Jamarcus Lawrence can play the 1, can play the 2. His defense is really pretty good.
No, his defense was garbage. It was average when he left. It was not pretty good. It was average.
Well,
in my opinion, would always point to Jamarcus as one of his better defenders.
Andy was a decent 3-point shooter. He didn't always shoot well, but man, he would have made more than some of the guys are making now. And I just question some of the decisions they have made in the portal. It's a shame too, in my mind, because I think you have a player, a once in a generation type player in Bryce Williams. I don't know that you'll get another Bryce for 20 years because they haven't had a Bryce in 20 years. Bryce is the best player at Nebraska. You said it. We were trying to think of guys, and you said it immediately. Alex March, and I agree. He's the best player.
A bucket. Yeah,
he can play the 1, the 2, the 3. He's the best mid-range shooter, I think, at Nebraska since Teron Lue. He never misses free throws. He shoots 91%. He's not a great 3-point shooter, but I contend that he would be much better if he had help.
36%.
Yeah,
bad.
I think he'd be 45% if he had help, because you wouldn't be able to lock in on him all the time. I think he would have a lot more open shots if Nebraska had spacers. It's funny to me, it's crazy to me that Fred Hoiberg, one of the best shooters in the National Basketball Association when he was there, hasn't recruited shooters aside from Casey, CJ,
and let's face
Connor.
It, when they got here, they haven't done what they were supposed to do. I mean, you can knock Connor all you want to, but the guy's still shooting over 40%.
Oh, I'm not knocking Connor. I think part of it is Connor's doubled too. Bryce gets doubled all the time. You can focus on 3 players and slack off others. And I'm not going to name names, but you can go to any. If I'm the coach of any team in the Big Ten, I'm saying, don't let Bryce beat me, even though he does. That's how good Bryce is. He still beats you, even though you put a man and a half on him every game. And then you probably sag a little bit on Jawan because he's not known as a great 3-point shooter, and you say drive, and he still does. So those 2 guys are playing really well. And then Connor has been a little inconsistent. Sometimes he shoots well, sometimes he doesn't. But if they just had a little help, those 2 guys, wow, what a team. Like last year's team was that good, 23-11.
And that's where Burke was he was that guy that was able to step up and hit some threes. And he would fake the 3 after nailing 2, as opposed to doing a heat check and do the pump fake, take 4 steps in, do a Euro step, and have a layup. Like he was getting to that point where he was comfortable and his game was working. Yeah. And the injury happened, and I don't know what happened to him mentally, but he just seems like a totally different guy. He's been horrible the last 2 games.
Well, it's not over. Is it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor?
No, it was not.
Well, it's not over now. Some people don't ever get that joke.
The Germans didn't bomb Pearl Harbor.
Germans didn't bomb.
You're like, watch a movie. Come on.
We've got BC. He would know that joke.
Yes,
Christopherson would definitely be all over that one. BC Husker 27. Husker Hoops and Ball will do it. Up next, Mike Melby, Tom Stevens, Husker Rewind.
something that's in demand and more stable in this economy. IT? Yeah, cybersecurity, maybe even AI. That's what I did. Really? How? Went to My Computer Career. You don't need any prior experience, and you can start your new career in a matter of months. A lot of IT pros go to school there, too, to level up. Sweet. Are classes online or on campus? Both. Wow, I'll check it out. Thanks.
Make this your year. Take the free career evaluation now at mycomputercareer.edu. Financial aid is available for qualified students. Are you having trouble hearing? Hearing loss can devastate the quality of your life. Now, there's an affordable fix for you or your loved one. Rated in the best hearing aids of 2024 by USA Today, Audion Hearing has the highest quality hearing aids at the lowest prices. Just $189.
I actually like them better.
Hey, how are you?
$5,000 hearing aids.
Fantastic. We'll talk a little hoops and football. Perfect. I think JJ is the man next year. What have you heard?
Hearing.com.
McCarthy.
What if you got rewarded for every good decision? What if your heart had a special way of letting you know it appreciated?
I won't ask you about it, but I had to think of it because I keep, I'm on Facebook all the time, Viking sites or wherever I am, and they go back and forth. They say they're going to franchise Sam and then trade him, or just trade McCarthy for 3 draft picks. Whatever, because he's a bad quarterback class, so you get the case for either. So, anyway. Yeah. I'm not.
It can lower bad cholesterol levels, and that's good for your heart.
Okay. All right. We'll talk mostly hoops. Probably not Viking football. All right.
Learn more at heart.org/Facebook.
You want to take it back? Sure.
Okay. Info proudly supports the American Heart Association's Face the Facts.
BC's with.
Today, my new dad and I shot off a rocket in the park.
Today, my new son and I failed to shoot off a rocket.
He knew exactly what to do.
I had no clue what I was doing.
We set up the rocket. Hit ignition. And then
nothing. Sometimes I laugh when I'm frustrated.
Husker out of nowhere, the rocket launched into the air.
Rocket did get into the air.
I've never seen anything fly so high.
And then crashed into a kite. And then the pond.
Isaiah Nayor had himself a day.
What's that?
Isaiah Nayor had himself a day.
Thousands of kids in foster care will take you just as you are. For more information on how you can adopt, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Back to Husker Rewind.
I'll play a Fred Liner.
Old enough to remember Nebraska's national titles.
Tommy Frenker. How many tackles can one man break? Touchdown.
Yeah, young enough to remember what they had for lunch.
How about a nice, greasy pork sandwich served in a dirty ashtray?
On 1499.3 KLIN.
You can't get down, whatever it was, 18 or 20, and all of a sudden decide to flip the switch. It's, we're not good enough for that. And this league is too good for that to do it to anybody. And we did a lot of really good things in that run, but it wasn't long enough stretches. And I know we've talked a lot about that this year. And our pace finally got to where it needed to be. Our urgency defensively, we got deflections, we were at the level, and that led to good, efficient offense. And when we're taking the ball out of the net, we're just not a very good team right now. We don't have enough weapons, to knock down shots out there.
They were not a good enough team to knock down shots for a long time.
For most of the year, they haven't had anybody not named Rice or Connor make a lot of shots.
No, rare occasions, you got the 1-3 from Raleigh, the one game down the stretch.
Burke had the 3-3
yeah.
That one game, and then he injured himself. He didn't himself. I had to let Rice his foot. But they have
it happens. And here we are. We're still on the bubble on the good side, according to a handful of people. Brian Christopherson from Husker 24/7 says we're in for sure, and we're going to go to the Sweet 16. That's what he was saying.
I thought it was crazy that he said that.
But he was very confident in the Sweet 16.
Right, Brian? No, no, no. What
Yeah,
do
we
you
all
think?
live that life, Brian.
What do you think? I mean, because I still see Bracket Matrix or the Jerry Palms. I don't think he has them in, but I think Mike DeCourcy does. There, Andy Katz I think does still have them in. What do you see? Okay.
The inconsistency with this team, game in and game out, and even 4-minute stretch between media timeouts to media timeout to media timeout. Do you remember a Nebraska basketball team that has had such a difficult time just being at least remotely consistent? It's been astonishing to me.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned the hang heads,
BC Husker 24/7. This is Fred talking about it.
And I think this team at times has been good about not hanging their head for too long. But when you have a team that can't shoot, and this team really struggles to shoot outside of Bryce and sometimes Connor and Jawan, it struggles to score, period. It's tough to have the same energy on defense, BC. Yeah.
Where's Tommy Frazier?
Yeah. A Bo Reed. Yep.
BC, let me ask you this. You say and it's honest. There's no one guy on this team, Jawan, tiny bit, that literally is the grab you by the shirt collar, lift you off the ground, slam you against the wall, and say, enough of this crap. Go do your job. There's not that guy. There's not the vocal, demanding leader on this team. With that said, is there someone on this team that can take it upon themselves in your mind and not do that, but do enough to light a fire underneath some guys that maybe don't have confidence right now, that don't believe right now? Is there a guy on this roster that you think could do that?
BC Husker 24/7, our guest. Basketball is so much more fun when the ball goes through the net. And last year's team was fun to watch because you had Bryce and Jawan, and you had obviously Casey and Rink, and Josiah could even shoot it. Then you had CJ Wilcher and Jamarcus Lawrence, all those guys that could shoot it. And they let the guys like CJ and Jamarcus maybe go or maybe not. Maybe they really tried to keep them. Maybe they thought they could get Ricky Fiddler. Maybe they thought they could get
Salas.
Or, Chucky Hepburn, who's having a 37 last night at Louisville for the 19th ranked Cardinals. Maybe they thought do you think they just thought they could upgrade to, Chucky or Hunter and think they would be okay? Or, because if they would have CJ right now and Jamarcus, I think this would be a pretty good team. They're a really good team. It's already a pretty good team. Hmm. We had. I'll mention it. We had three coaches. DeKeel was next, I think, here for the bowl game. Phil Snow is new, associate head coach. Phil Snow, linebacker coach. DeKeel Shorts, wide receiver. They all spoke to the media this week. What did you gather from the conversations with those guys? Yeah, he called who was it? Mike Eckler, a home run hire. And I think he was pretty instrumental in the interviewing process with all these coaches, wasn't he?
Hey, real quick, I want to ask you about the combine. There are some former Huskers that turned some heads, and what I continued to see was in the last X number of years, there have been X hundred position players at this position, and Ty Robinson, Isaiah Naylor, and Thomas Piconi ranked 20th of those hundreds. Like some former Huskers are making some noise at the combine. What does that tell you about maybe some lack of usage at Nebraska? Not Ty Robinson, obviously, or just did he miss out when they were here?
Did they get the most out?
Yeah, did they get the most out?
Ty Robinson, they did.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's rules. Big sales pitch. Hey, come here. We'll get you to the NFL. So you want those guys to be in the NFL and then succeed. So that's a pretty big deal. Hey, great stuff as always, BC. We love having you on. Appreciate the time. Thanks, you, BC. Thanks, BC. We wrote our own editorials. We haven't read each other's editorials. We don't know what they are. But Mike is going to go first. His Nebraska basketball fandom editorial. Is that a good way to describe it?
That actually is pretty accurate.
All right. We both wrote one. Mike will deliver his coming up next. Husker Rewind. Tom Stevens, Mike Melby. More on the way.
Place to raise a family, build a business, or grow a community. We're counting on working parents to make it happen, and they're counting on childcare professionals to have their backs. Employers and other contributors can earn up to $100,000 tax credit for strengthening childcare in our communities and state. Learn more at nebraskachildcaretaxcredit.org. Brought to you by First Five Nebraska and Nebraska Children and Families Foundation, and aired by the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station. Everything
I didn't even read anything about Markowski. I know Nebraska women won, so maybe I'll have you open.
I'll be honest, I didn't pay. That's the whole thing.
They won. So I haven't even looked at the stats, but probably we should know something when we introduce Andy.
He's at 6, right?
Huh? He's at 6. So we have time. Not a ton.
Did you know you can get your prescriptions for less at your local pharmacy?
18 and 10 overall.
Free app that can save you money on your medications. Just search for your prescription, choose the pharmacy and the price that
site's not updated.
And then show your good or coupon to your pharmacist at the drop.
98.77. What did Alexis do? 30 points. Ooh.
And it works whether you have insurance.
He was 13 of 19 from the field. We could talk about senior night too. Next week was the reason he didn't come on.
Don't you wish your life came with a warning app?
They lost. Didn't they lose? They lost.
Just a little heads up before something bad happens.
Move your coffee cup away from your computer. No.
So
Yeah, they lost to Washington 83-62.
98-77.
But they had that great comeback win before that. Anyway, we'll just mostly talk Husker Hoops. We'll go ahead with a few questions.
Stopping smoking and eating healthier, you can stop pre-diabetes before it leads to type 2 diabetes. It's easy to learn your risk. Take the 1-minute test today at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Warning, the cap is loose on that ketchup.
Don't wait. You have the power to change the outcome. Visit doihaveprediabetes.org today. That's doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its pre-diabetes awareness partners. Hey, wouldn't it be great if life came with a remote control? You know, you could hit pause when you needed to, or hit rewind, like that time you knocked down that wasp's nest. Well, life doesn't always give you time to change the outcome, but pre-diabetes does. With early diagnosis and a few healthy changes, you can stop pre-diabetes.
Just you want to launch into it, or you want me to play a rule combine thing?
Take the 1-minute test today.
No.
Just take it? You want to just take it?
Yeah.
Okay.
The most complete weekly recap of Husker sports.
Nebraska national champions! Nebraska's a national champion! Go celebrate!
Back to Husker Rewind with Mike Melby and Tom Stevens on 1409.
Welcome back to Husker Rewind. That is Tom Stevens. He is the legend. My name is Mike Melby. Some people say I'm an old guy and I got to take advantage.
That's kind of describes really both of us.
Yeah, a little bit. It does. But I think it's better just because.
More of a badge of honor.
Yeah, it's more of a badge of honor than a bad attitude. So you said earlier in the week, you know what I think we got to do? Editorial, like just our thoughts on Nebraska basketball. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to bullet point this and I'm going to ad-lib it. And about 2 hours before the show, I ran inside. I was working on I'm teaching myself how to pour resin and other weird things, you know, kind of weird stuff. And something popped in my brain. What popped in my brain was the question, who am I?
Who are you? You're Mike Melby.
But that's the question that I ask in this editorial.
Okay.
Who am I? Throughout life, we all wake up some mornings and we ask ourselves that question. Who am I today? Yesterday changed me. Maybe for the better, maybe for the worse. Who am I today? Who do I want to be today based on what happened yesterday? Now, in my life, I have answered that I know who I want to be. And damn, I am good at telling myself how great I can be. Now, I'm not to the point of being a super fan of Nebraska basketball. I'm close. The losses all hurt. The wins are all exhilaration. Each year, I look at the roster and I look at the schedule through scarlet and cream colored glasses. And you know what? We're going to win them all. It's a natty. It's
you
easy.
do that.
Yeah. No, I'm thinking 32-0. We're going to win the Big Ten tournament.
We both do that.
Yeah,
it's a guaranteed national championship.
And then the cynical side of myself says, you do realize they may not win a single game. Don't you remember the heartache of last season when you thought the same thing at the beginning of the year? And remember the pain of each loss? Hell, some days the pain of a single missed free throw or an offensive rebound they gave up or a missed wide open three. Why do you believe? Why do you even care? You know what? I have to, though. If I didn't care about this, or anything for that matter, then why even exist? But I do care. Husker Nation cares. This team cares. You know why? Because they exist. I think collectively, this Nebraska basketball team has woken up on many mornings this season. And they've been asking themselves, who are we today? Yesterday changed us, sometimes for the better, sometimes not. And when it was not for the better, they all have had the right answers. They all know who they are. They all know their role on the team. Every single player on Nebraska's roster has played a game where they were the best version of themselves and the role that they are to play on this team. Also, all played a game where they're not their best. So we're even average or even good. Why? That's the question, isn't it? Why does this team have such an understanding? Like, why does every member of this team get in front of the microphone and have such an acute understanding of what they need to do individually, of what they need to do collectively as a team to be successful, but then falter when their moment to shine and do their job is presented to them? I don't have the answer. I know who does, though, or who I believe can find that answer over the next few weeks. I believed in him from Sunday, February 5th, 2023, when Nebraska sat at 11-16 on the season. And as Nebraska's head coach, he was 36-83, coming off of 4 straight losses after having lost Emmanuel Bandamel and a few games before that, Juwan Gary, for the season. I was asked if I hope or if I believe in Fred Hoiberg. I said I believe. I believe in the man. I believe he has the answer to these questions. Like, who are we today? How do we become the best version of ourselves collectively as a team? Every single game from here on out. We're in the midst of the best run of Nebraska basketball since the 90s, and Danny need Nebraska ball. So far this season, Nebraska basketball has talked all the right talk after wins and all the right talk after losses. From Tuesday's game at Ohio State until the season is over, it's time for them to walk the walk.
I love it. I love it. Well done.
Thank you. No applause, just throw money.
I don't have any money, so you're just gonna have to take the applause. I will say this: Fred Hoiberg is 37-80 in the Big Ten. I think he's 80-106, something like that overall, in 6 years of Nebraska basketball. There's not a ton of Big Ten teams that would have given him this much time, 6th year. But because it is Nebraska basketball, I think this is my problem with Nebraska basketball in general. Oh, it's Nebraska basketball. They made the tournament last year. We're good. We're good for another 10 years. That buys us time. We're fine. And I don't blame Fred. I don't know who I blame. I'm looking for someone to blame. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's me for going to Pinnacle Bank Arena every single game. They drew 15,700 fans. There's not very many teams, maybe Michigan State and a few others, that would draw that kind of crowd for a team that's 17-12, 17-11 going into that game. But Nebraska shows up. Nebraska fans show up each and every game. And it was a whiteout, and it was beautiful. And the students were on fire, and they were great. But I left angry, as I many times do. And I felt, here's the feeling I had. We deserve better. We deserve better from Fred, probably. The administration, definitely. 1890, most probably. The players, yes, because they're now paid. I can't say we deserve a lot more from Bryce and Juwan. Those guys play their hearts out every time they step on the floor. And that's the thing that bothers me most. I believe Juwan and Bryce in particular, is an NBA player. I think he can succeed in the NBA at a high level. I think he's the best player Nebraska's had in 20 years. And they didn't put pieces. Maybe they'll still do it. But it's ugly when they do it. And it's ugly when they don't. It was fun watching the ball go through the hoop last year. I want to see more of that. I thought that's what we would see, especially in year 6 of the Fred Hoiberg era. His son's a good shooter. I expected that. He doesn't take a lot of shots. Fred doesn't take any because he doesn't play the game anymore. And he has a heart condition. Somebody has to step up and help Bryce and Juwan. They deserve it. Nebraska basketball fans deserve it. They deserve better. I still think they'll make the NCAA tournament. I hope they play with a little passion because they're going to need it. They're going to need it to get there. I didn't expect my version of the editorial to be this hour, but I still have one coming. It's not as long as yours. Yours was fantastic.
So with what you just said, I know we're up against the hard break at the top of the hour. You said I want to blame somebody. Like I said, my editorial, I believe Fred can find the answers, so we're not blaming anybody.
I love it. I love it because I hate blaming people. We'll be back for hour number 2. Blame me for that. Coming up next.
Or me.
Here's another broadcast house station you may like.
D107.3.
Your playlist for the workday or the weekend. We're interchangeable like that.
I just want to tell you guys how much I enjoy listening to this.
Yeah, I literally started writing that at 5 after 3.
All day while I listen to you guys.
And then I was on a roll and I was typing really hard on my keyboard.
Lincoln's #1 at workstation, B107.3.
On the battlefield, there's a saying America's military men and women live by. Never leave a fallen warrior behind, ever. Off the battlefield, Wounded Warrior Project operates with the same goal. Wounded Warrior Project was created to help our men and women returning home with the scars of war, whether those scars are physical or mental. Wounded Warrior Project. We never leave a fallen warrior.
Hi, Andy. Tom Stevens.
Ever.
Hey, thanks for being on with us. Congratulations for Alexis. Great game. Hey, needed. Sorry about senior. I know the senior weekend was fun, but you'd like to have a win, but still.
Entrepreneurs start with a dream and a drive to build a better life.
Yeah.
If you have a small business idea to grow,
and if they had Natalie on this team, they'd be so good.
You don't have to go it alone. Since 1964, SCORE has helped millions
they'll get her.
of entrepreneurs build their business.
Does she get the year back?
They are the nation's largest nonprofit source of expert mentoring, resources, and education. Whether you're starting out, building back, or have worked at it for years, SCORE will match you with specialized mentors.
Yeah, that's what they should do. That's what they should definitely do. All right, we'll talk women's and men's hoops. So here we go. 2 minutes away. Appreciate you doing this. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Ready to help.
You're such a nice guy.
Find a mentor today at score.org.
From the Molo Pizzeria and Ristorante Studios, we are the voice of Lincoln. KLIN Lincoln, KDK83 Lincoln, KT57TN Lincoln is 1499.3 KLIN. Welcome to the best recap of Husker sports. Husker Rewind.
I can't get the
hosts, Tom Stevens and
can't pull the thing up. Production.
They'll hand it to off the left side. Looking.
Production's not pulling up. You know how to do it? I'm pulling it up right here, and it's not coming up. Do you know what I'm doing wrong? Something down here?
No. Yeah. Nothing's popping on product.
No.
Can you minimize that? See if it earned.
How do I do that?
I don't know. What the heck?
I don't get it. Huh. What do I do?
Honoring our leader, Greg Sharp, with his eyes on the diamond and his hands on our shoulders. Nebraska takes down 16th ranked.
Oh well.
6-4. Sharpie, that one is for you.
Now, here's Tom Stevens and Mike Melby on 1499.3 KLI.
You want to take it or I'll take it? Doesn't matter. You want to take it?
Yeah.
Welcome back. Hour number 2. Mike Melby, Tom Stevens, Husker Rewind every Sunday, 5 to 7. Nebraska women, as tough as the loss was for the men yesterday, the women had no problem with Northwestern today, 98-77. The star, Alexis Markowski, she was 13 of 19 from the field and had another great day, as she usually does. 30 points. And dad, Andy Markowski, congratulations. What a day for Alexis. That was There you go. Nebraska basketball on the men's side, not as good. Another tough loss. Man, what a tough week. They lose 16 or 49 to 46 to Michigan early in the week. And then yesterday, the heartbreaking loss after taking the lead with 10 seconds left to go. Minnesota nails a three-pointer with 4 seconds left to go, and you lose a heartbreaker. And now they're on the NCAA tournament bubble. How would you describe this year for Nebraska men's hoops?
Well, and the key thing for me with the Husker Hoops, Andy Markowski joining us on the Summit Lawn talk and text line, Andy, is that the fact this team does not have, outside of Bryce Williams, like a superstars. Bryce is the go-to guy to go score, but that's his role. Juwan Gary has a role. Connor Esigian has a role. Andrew Morgan, like they all have a specific role. And when they play those roles, this team, I think, can compete with anybody in the country. The problem is, how do you get every guy to play their role to the best of their ability every night, especially now that it is literally do or die? How do they do it? Good point.
Former captain under JV in Nebraska basketball, Andy Markowski. I think the point is the problem, not just this year, but maybe preventing the team from being a great team last year is the lack of a point guard. In fact, Jamarcus Lawrence tried it, and I think he was pretty good at it at times, but Bryce had to take over at point guard, and then he's had to do that again today. How much do you think that takes away, or yesterday, and all season, how much do you think that takes away from his offense, having to be the initiator and the scorer? Yeah. Andy, you mentioned he's a pro on this team. Do you think he's really a pro? And we've talked about this before. Now you've had a chance to see pretty much a full season of Bryce. Is he an NBA player?
Andy, Nebraska's got Ohio State coming up on the road. Hard fought win at home. They were down at half by 5. They outscore Ohio State by 13, I think it was, in the second half. How tough, and go back to your playing days, was it to rebound and win again against the same team the second time you faced them in conference, especially on the road? And what is Nebraska facing on Tuesday night against Ohio State?
Two-time captain under Danny Nee at Nebraska, talking with Andy Markowski. It's an interesting era that we're in college basketball right now. Andy, you've had a couple of borderline Hall of Fame coaches quit. Tony Bennett quit before the start of the year. Jim Larinaga did it at Miami. Both said that they were just uncomfortable in this day and age of college basketball and NIL and revenue sharing. But for Nebraska to be successful going forward, they're going to have to, find, maybe it's Hoiberg. He's going to have to be the GM and pick the right guys and find ways to, reach the salary cap and not go over. And how hard do you think that will be going forward for coaches in college basketball? Mm-hmm.
The one thing that, to me, to your point of kids that want to be here, they want to win for themselves, for their teammates. It seems like women's sports are that way more than guys. Guys are more egotistical. They're more worried about what that paycheck is and all of that.
Women can do that too.
They can, but I want to kind of focus and spin this conversation back around and ask your thoughts on Nebraska women's basketball team going into the postseason. Earlier this week, one of the Nebraska basketball players on the women's team, Callan Hake, celebrated a birthday. And I know this because I happened to be at the same establishment that they celebrated at, which was Muchachos. And I'm sitting just at their bar and having dinner, and I'm listening to the interaction of all the players together. Dylan Raiola showed up, wished happy birthday, was there talking to some people. It was this genuine camaraderie, this genuine love of each other. Like, that team seems to get along so well. To me, that means a lot going into a postseason where things are going to go sideways, and as opposed to pointing a finger, you're going to put an arm around somebody and say, hey, we got you. To me, this team feels like that. Your knowledge of this team, with your daughter being basically the superstar on the team, do you get that feeling as well? And what do you think their chances are heading into the postseason?
Wow. Alexis obviously has the ability to play professionally or overseas or here. What's she thinking right now? How good would that team be if she came back for another year? You get Natalie back. Britt's going into her sophomore year. You're going to get a recruiting class
around them as well. That could be a really good team.
I'm going on a limb and saying I think Amy Williams would be okay if Alexis wanted to come back for one more year.
I think she'd be fine with it. Yeah, I think you would make a spot for Alexis. I'm just thinking out loud. Well, I'm so happy for you. It must be just, I can't imagine what that's like having a daughter or son that is that good at that level and be able to soak it in and enjoy it. It's oh wow.
Yep.
Wow.
Well, and Andy, I'm a Waverly Viking, class of '85. So you guys beating Norris, even though I don't like Pius either team, but you know what? Knocking off Norris, I dislike them far more than I dislike Pius. So greatly appreciate your daughter doing what she did.
Oh yeah, it has not happened yet. And when they make the NCAA tournament, because I think they will, we're going to have you back. Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it. There you go.
Absolutely.
Great stuff. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Andy.
Andy Markowski, former Husker captain under Danny Nee. I still have my editorial to come.
Yep.
And we have Amy Just.
We have Amy Just next, though. Brilliant columnist.
Great columnist for the Journal Star. We'll talk a little Husker basketball, a little football, and whatever else comes to mind. Amy Just. I would love to know what I'm doing wrong. Can you figure this out? You're the computer guy.
And the biggest fish on a 27-foot sports craft. Cabins are fully accommodated with generous meals. Luxury coaches will drive
I'd love to play
and back. It's happening July 13th through 17th at Ballard's Resort on the Lake of the Woods. Get details at KLIN.com.
Did you know you can get your prescriptions for less at your local pharmacy? You can with GoodRx. It's the free app that can save you money on your medications. Just search for your prescription, choose the pharmacy and the price.
Usually you just shut it off, right?
Show your GoodRx coupon to your pharmacist at the drop-off counter. GoodRx works at over 70,000 pharmacies, including Walmart, Rite Aid, and Walgreens. And it works whether you have insurance or not. It's easy to save. Next time you drop off your prescription, check GoodRx.
I don't have her number.
Today,
You call her?
GoodRx.com. GoodRx is not insurance. Seems everything costs more these days. Gas,
Oh well,
groceries.
no big deal.
When was the last time you checked your wireless bill?
Like, I don't get this.
When it comes to big wireless, if you're staying, you may be
I
overpaying.
had like 2 or 3 more bites,
Fast, reliable nationwide coverage with
but that's okay. I played most of them.
All right, so what do we do?
Yep, there you go. Pick up the that, hit the top one. Just dial 402.
Consumer.com and start saving today. Plans include $5 credit for auto pay and e-bill.
Yeah, you kind of have to do it quick. 40 hit the top, 402, and then just quickly dial the whole number.
First,
There
I
you
did some reading about it. I found a lot of great advice on how to quit smoking and picked out the ways I thought would work best for me.
There you go.
I started by setting a quit
And
date. Then I
And
threw out
then
my ashtrays,
hit the
lighters,
bottom one.
and
Your say, hey,
I did other things like exercise more, and it worked. But I'd still get cravings, especially on long car rides. To help me with that, I put a picture of my mother in my car. She died of lung cancer from smoking cigarettes when I was only 16. Now I have a 16-year-old.
Hey, Amy, Mike Melby.
That picture
How are you?
reminds me that I don't
Doing
want to
good. Looks like we're going to be ready to go in just about under a minute. All right. Thanks.
You can quit.
and hit the
For
bottom.
free help,
Yep.
call
Perfect.
1-800-QUIT.
I'll let you introduce.
A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services at CDC.
Daisy was abandoned and placed in foster care at 15 years old.
Before I was adopted, I felt like I wasn't enough. I had a hole in my heart, but when my mom asked to adopt me, that hole was closed.
The Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption is changing the lives of teenagers lingering in foster care, like Daisy, who need a safe, permanent home now. You can help. Learn more at davethomasfoundation.org.
Husker Rewind with Tom Stevens and Mike Melby. Two guys old enough to actually remember Nebraska's 5 national titles.
Man, woman, and child did that. Put them in the aisle.
On 1499.3 KLIN.
Welcome back, Husker Rewind on this Sunday afternoon. I'm Mike Melby. That is Tom Stevens. Hello. And on the Summit Lawn and text line is the Lincoln Star. How is your Sunday going?
You're a cleaning mop. So you have a spotless house? Is that it?
Normally, my productive, like earlier before the show, I do these weird side projects, and I got into resin pouring with colors and taking wood that's broken and all that, and I was working on all that stuff earlier today, and I did not clean anything. I made a gigantic mess. So
I'm not the cleaner of the family. Heidi does most of that, but I do load the dishwasher.
Take out the trash.
Oh, that's impressive.
Which is really a lot of work because nobody appreciates the guy who loads
the dishwashers
and unloads them. It takes 20 minutes every day to do that. So I think over the accumulation of time, I think I should get more credit than I do, but I don't get a lot of credit for that.
Amy, what are your thoughts? Let's just go to men's basketball because it's kind of Nebraska women's basketball rolled today. I want to talk about that in a brilliant article that you wrote that was in last week's Journal Star. I think you promoted it as this is one I'm pretty proud of long before, and I think you're going to enjoy reading it. I did. I cried. But let's talk about men's basketball first. What's going on with this team in your mind?
Yeah, they started 12-2, and I thought this is a team that's just greater than the sum of its parts. They just play well together. They play with a lot of intensity. At least they did at that time defensively, and it seems like they just knew how to win. And then they lost 6 in a row, and you're wondering, okay, are they going anywhere? And then they come back and win 4 in a row. So you can't. So this is probably a team that's going to win the Big Ten tournament. That's probably the way it's going to play out. Yeah, that's true. You got to win at least one of the next 2, right?
How frustrating is that? I mean, I'm a fan. Tom and I did kind of our own little editorials on the season, and in mine, which I did at the end.
We don't write.
No, we don't write. Well, no, actually.
But in mine that I read over the air, it was I'm not a super fan, but I'm kind of close. As a super fan, and I mean, you covered. You covered the Saints. I mean, that's one of the most passionate fan bases around, especially for professional sports. I mean, like psychotic, right? So the fans live and die with like sometimes every play, let alone every game. And, you feel it as a fan. Can you pinpoint anything? Well, actually, you know what? I'm going to change my question. Tell me the relationship differences between Nebraska fans and Saints fans, because the passion between the two of them is insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I went to a Browns Saints game earlier this year, and it was packed. for a bad Saints team and a bad. I mean, neither team was good, but the Saints won, and you thought they won the Super Bowl. Oh yeah.
I can imagine. Well, and you were down there for a few years. What's it like living in New Orleans during Mardi Gras?
I'm guessing you've been there for the combine many times because you were covering the Saints. Nebraska has 4 players there right now. What is the combine like? I mean, do fans show up in droves? I mean, I know it's in India this year. Yeah. Compare and contrast. I mean, you covered the Saints football. Now you're covering Nebraska football. Are there any similarities? Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a little bit about the difference with being a beat writer versus a columnist. I get the difference. I think Tom does. I know you do. But for people that are listening that hear the terms, can you walk us through a little bit of the difference and what it's like being that beat writer that has an opinion you really want to say, but you can't because you're not the columnist?
Mm-hmm. Well, you covered Sean Payton and obviously Drew Brees, right? During the glory years of Saints football. And now you're headed to Nebraska, where they finally get a bowl
win for the first time in 7 years.
But what's it like covering Matt Rule versus Sean Payton? What going into year 3, Nebraska is 12-13. Of course, the take with Matt Rule is year 3. He always makes the jump. It always happened it did happen at Temple, and then it happened at Baylor. Not so much at Carolina. He claims he didn't have enough time, and he didn't. He had 2 years. But what do you expect in year 3 under Matt Rule?
Well, and that was going to be my next question to you is based on transfer portal window opening number 1 and what they've accomplished. What do you think of the moves they made? Most pundits say they are one of the better recruiting rankings, top 5, top 7 from that first portal move. What do you think they need to add? And just kind of give me your thoughts on where you think this roster is going to wind up with that 105.
You came from the NFL. Rule has started comparing his time in the NFL, where college football, especially the Big Ten, the SEC, is now. And he basically said, hey, it wasn't about revenue dropping Tennessee. I don't want to play Tennessee and then have to play 9 Big
Ten. He told that to Urban Meyer the other day.
What's your take on Nebraska dropping Tennessee for 2026? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like that's going to happen with the SEC and the Big Ten.
I think eventually.
Yeah.
Amy, before we let you go, I want to ask you something about, I mentioned earlier the article about Alexis Markowski, and the focus of it was more almost on her mom and that family. Where do you come up with the ideas for some of these stories that, I mean, I'll be honest, there's times if you, the way you preview an upcoming story will tell me whether or not I need to grab like a box of Kleenex, because I'm probably going to have an issue reading it. And the way you tell the stories is so refreshing, and from such a different angle, where you're at an angle that you give a much wider view to me than others that have been columnists throughout, whether it's, and I'm talking national stage wise. But what triggers in your mind when you're like, you know what, I think this would be a good story? Is it just random? Do you have the thoughts ahead of time? How does that come about?
Good, because we just had him on about 20 minutes ago. Wow. I imagine sometimes the stories just take on a life of their own that you don't know, like you don't intend this is going to be a tearjerker. You let it go where it goes, right? Well, he's a crier, but he's the best. We're going to miss him, right?
We are really going to miss him.
Have you gotten to know Daily Buster at all? Yeah.
Well, and you know a little bit of the background with Danny, I'm sure, when she played for Nebraska. I cannot wait to read something from you when you dig into her growing up in playing high school volleyball in Nebraska, ultimately becoming, the setter, the go-to, and then having it taken away from her, and like that whole and her mental approach to everything, and how she handled everything, and mistakes and lessons and positives. And I cannot wait for that story, because I know it's coming someday. Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you.
You literally right in August already.
So okay. Well, you're really good at what you do. We appreciate you being on.
All right. Thanks, Amy.
Amy Just,
appreciate the time.
Of the Lincoln Journal-Star. I enjoyed the Saints conversation.
Oh, yeah.
They are a crazy fan base. Went to, as I mentioned, Cleveland has a crazy fan base as well. But the Browns played the Saints this year, and we went, I want to say, in September, and it was fun. Their fans are great. It was just a good time. All right. One more segment, my editorial. It's not going to be as long as yours or as good as yours.
Well, I talk too much anyway. We already know that. So,
Husker Rewind will be back after this.
John Hannity is next on 1499.
She's great.
KLIN.
Hunger is heralded for 1 in 5 kids in our community. You can help fight childhood hunger by supporting.
I keep wanting to, like, when I'm at basketball games, run into her and like just shake her hand and meet her in person. Like I never have talked to her in person. And one of these days I will. But yeah, just because there's been times like I didn't know. It was funny because I read, I want to say she wrote the article, her introductory article about who she is, where she came from, and all that type of stuff when she took over for SIP.
Yeah.
And I was like, I mean, we all love SIP, right? We know where he comes from.
Right.
You kind of know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
And you do with her now, but just that first introductory, hey, my name's Amy, and this is what I'm about.
Yeah. In a different way, she has a Dirk Chaplin type of gift.
And that was the comparison because I loved her.
Yeah.
And her ability to like just I don't even, like she finds this tiny little speck on the glass that she's looking through, and she's like, you know, that's distorting what I'm seeing right now. I think I ought to go investigate. And all of a sudden it becomes a whole other story of its own. And I don't know, she's so fun to read.
Yeah.
In the middle of all these acres,
and like her gamers,
only person on earth.
Sometimes being a columnist, being able to say certain things that, you know, the beat writer that's going to get beat up by the coach. But the flip side is she's at every press conference. She's just like a beat writer, and she may say something that's relatively harsh, but she does it with such an honesty and an openness that most times, I don't know that I've seen any times that it's not, but most times the coach is like, yeah, you kind of got a point. You know what I mean?
Right.
She has a way of saying something that may be a little harsh that just lands because it's simply true without being mean.
Right.
That's what I mean. I love reading a good sports writer, and like Rick Riley to me was the best ever. He could tell a story so well. He was the back page writer for SI, and I've got all his books and all that stuff. And like Sip is so good, Chattel is so good, and Amy in a short time has already gotten to that point.
Why can't I think of his name? Greatest free throw shooter I've read all time. He was like a 98%. Jack Moore.
Yeah. It wasn't 98. I think it was 99.
I think statistically he was the best free throw shooter of all time in college basketball. I think at one time he was for years. Died in a plane crash.
With a combined 60+ years of broadcasting experience.
Man, we're old.
I guess that means they're really old. They're going to make him do this till he's 90. Here's Tom Stevens and Mike Mel.
Welcome back. Final segment. Husker Rewind. Tom Stevens, Mike Melby. Every Sunday, 5 to 7. You did your little Nebraska basketball editorial.
It was really long. It was long-winded, but then
it was good.
It was really good.
I, like you, Mike, grew up loving Nebraska basketball. I remember Jerry Fort just being a machine, a scoring machine.
Stan Cloudy and Brian Banks actually had dinner at my house.
Was Stan Cloudy a part of that team that went in and beat Missouri with John Sunfeld?
Yes.
Sunvold, I think he was on that team.
Yep.
But Jack Moore was one of my favorite players. I think at one time one of the greatest free throw shooters in college basketball history, like 98%. Brian Carr, Dave Hoppen, of course, the all-time leading scorer, probably the best basketball player in Nebraska basketball history.
So real quick, Dave Hoppen, most career free throws made of a Husker, 559. Jack Moore, career percentage, .901.
He was only 90?
Yep, 446 out of 495 in his career.
I misremembered that. So I think then Bryce might surpass that. He's at 91, I think. But he played fewer years, I would guess. He played 3. This is his 3rd year. But Carl McPipe, I remember climbing. I would go to every year. I would go to the Nebraska basketball camp. We would, as 10-year-olds, climb on the arms of Alan Holder. He had the biggest guns in the world. He could still make threes. They weren't threes at the time, but 20-footers with all of his kids hanging on his arm. Nate Branch, who played for the Globetrotters, played for Nebraska. But we all know the stat. Nebraska is the only Power 4 team to have never won an NCAA tournament game. It's like a punchline to a joke. It looks like that statistic, it might be safe for another year again. We've all been we all know a Husker Hoops fan like that has lived it and died with it. Heck, I went to Joe Cipriano's basketball camps in the 70s. I was 10 years old when he kicked me out of a camp after saying, I said pass and go away. You're the same kid that was late for the meeting this morning. Get out of the line. He kicked me out of the camp. I paid to be there, and he kicked me out. I even have the distinction of getting yelled. I was yelled at by Mo Iba, who came in after Joe Cipriano. But I love Mo Iba as well. In fact, Mo and Cindy were friends of our family. They went to our church. We got all the hand-me-downs from the Iba family. I remember Mo finally making the NCAA tournament and then handing his resignation to Don Bryant, the AD at the time, after Nebraska lost to Western Kentucky in the 1986 tournament. He'd had enough of all the criticism. Nebraska finally makes the tournament. Mo hands in his resignation and leaves. I experienced the glory years of Husker Hoops under Danny Nee. Watched them go to 5 NCAA tournaments. King and Piatkowski and Reed and so many great players that were in the Nee era. I watched Barry Collier and Doc Sadler and Tim Miles and now Fred Hoiberg try to recreate the Nee magic. All have failed. It's not over for Hoiberg. He's in year 6. They made the tournament last year. They were 23-11. I say all this to point out the pain of being a Husker Hoops fan. Mike and myself have been there from the Devaney era, watching all of it. We've had bad coaches, but they were good coaches before they got to Nebraska. So were they really bad? No, I don't think they were. They just didn't succeed at Nebraska. Why? I don't know. Nebraska has one of the best arenas in college hoops right now. EVA is spectacular. And Nebraska is top 20 in attendance every single year. But even with mediocre to bad teams, Nebraska fans still show up. Why? Why do they show up? They aren't Iowa State or Creighton, who are consistently good. Nebraska's mediocre to bad, but they still keep coming. In this day and age of NIL, spending money on hoops, maybe that they will succeed. Maybe they will. I have hope that they will, because that's all I have. It's kind of sounding like your editorial in the first hour. Chucky Hepburn is now at Louisville. He's an Omaha product. We know so many of those stories. Hunter Salas is at Wake Forest. He's an Omaha product. Frankie Fiddler is going to Michigan State. St. Thomas, Josh Dix at Iowa. We deserve to win, Mike. We deserve to win. And whose fault is it that we aren't winning? Is it the AD? Is it 1890? Is it Nebraska? Is it the coach? Is it Fred Hoiberg? I don't think any of that's true. And I don't think Nebraska is cursed, to quote Tim Miles. I don't think they're cursed. Maybe they'll figure it out this year. Maybe this will be the year they break through and win an NCAA tournament game. It seems reasonable. They started 12-2. They went to 12-8. Then they were 16-8. And now they've lost 3 in a row. So they'll probably win the Big Ten tournament and go on to win an NCAA tournament game. I don't know. Nothing about this season makes sense, or Nebraska basketball in general makes sense. My lifetime of being a fan hasn't made a lot of sense. Some of the best teams were with Cipriano and Mo Iba, but they never made the tournament because there were only 32 teams invited. Maybe this is the year. Maybe it's time for me to buy in, to go all in on Nebraska basketball. Why not? What's there to lose?
Absolutely nothing, because we've already seen the way it ends in other seasons that we've bought in.
Yeah.
I like it. I like you and I are so similar because we both have such a passion. I mean, we had, for those that don't know, several probably do. Tom and I got season tickets together. Row 29, I think it was C15 is where we were. It was half court, and we'd be playing South Dakota State, and I'd have friends, and they'd laugh at Tom and I as we climbed all the way to the top of the rafters in row 29. But we're at half court. And so they're like, yeah, your seats suck. It's like, yeah, but you know what? We're still at half court for Kansas. We're still at half court for Missouri. We're still at half court when Billy Tubbs comes to town. And you and I would sit up there, and there was a older lady that was in row 28, and I remember probably 3 or 4 times a year for 3 or 4 years, you and I would be talking about the game, talking about the team, talking about the coach, and she would turn around and she would go, you two need to shut the hell up during the game and just go get your own damn radio show so you could talk about it. But stop bothering me while I'm trying to watch the game.
Wow. That was a fun era. I mean, again, you had Pike, you had Lou, you had Strickland, you had Carl Hayes. Maybe my favorite player to watch was Carl Hayes. Remember the 1-3-1?
Oh, yeah.
Him at the top of the 1-3-1. They had height. They had Tony Farmer and Rich King down low. They had a team that in 91, 92, was it?
90-91.
90-91, they went 26-8 and was a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament.
And got beat by Xavier, who could not miss threes.
That's Nebraska basketball. That's what it's like being in Nebraska basketball. Man. Even the best team ever.
Yeah.
And I don't believe they're jinxed. I think it's going to happen. I think it will happen maybe in an unlikely scenario. So why not this year?
Well, I mean, to make it Nebraska basketball story worthy, why not lose the last 2 of the regular season, not even be listed on the bubble anymore, and just go win the damn Big Ten tournament?
Top 25 has the SEC is the best league in the NCAA. They have 8 teams in the top 25, but the Big Ten is not far behind. They have 5. They have 8. Michigan State. Number 11 is Wisconsin. Number 15, Michigan. 16, Maryland. 20, Purdue. Then you have Oregon, who has won 5 in a row. They're in the NCAA tournament along with UCLA. So that makes what? 7 teams. 7. And then you have 2 more. Illinois. Illinois would make 8. I think they're probably in.
3 weeks ago they were locked, and now it's
they're
like,
18-11.
What the heck?
They're 10-8 in the league and 18-11. They're probably good. Now Indiana has crept up.
Yep.
That would make number 9. They're 18-11, 9-9 in the league, and then Nebraska at 17-12, and then you have a bunch of teams kind of fighting. Northwestern has actually played pretty decent basketball. I think they're up to 16 wins. They would need to go on a run. Nebraska needs to go on a run, win at least 2 more. Then you have Ohio State who needs to go on a run, and that's it. But it might as well be this year. It might as well be a crazy year, like the maybe the least talented team. If they make the NCAA tournament, this might be the least talented Nebraska basketball team that has made the tournament.
It will be by far. You've got 1 superstar. All those other teams had a superstar or 2, whether it was Rick King, whether it was Pike, whether it was Teron Lou. They all had guys that were going to take a game over when needed. And Nebraska has that with Bryce Williams, but what Nebraska doesn't have is that super strong supporting cast. They've got players. They got players that know their role, and when those players play their role to perfection, Nebraska can play with anybody in the country, including top-ranked teams. But if they don't, Nebraska can get beat by 40 on any given night.
Well, I decided to add my
editorial.
You read yours, mine, but they were both still fun.
Yours.
Well, thank you. Nobody died. It was pretty good.
The passion, man. You got me choked up once. So.
There you go. Try to choke you up at least once a week, and success. We'll be back next week with another show. Don't know who'll be on it, but I know it'll be good.
The guests are always awesome. Thanks to Amy.
Yeah,
Andy,
BC. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Good guys say
save lives. And one day you could save 8 lives by signing up to be an organ donor at the DMV, or when you get